Welcome to What's On Podcast. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're looking at plastics. You know, the stuff that's literally everywhere in our lives.
Absolutely everywhere.
From, like, vital things in healthcare to just the wrapping on your sandwich. It's strong, it's flexible, and yeah, it's cheap.
But that convenience, that initial benefit, it's hiding some really serious problems, isn't it?
It really is.
Our reliance on plastic, it comes with these massive environmental, health, even societal costs. It's a real tangle.
Exactly. So that's what we're doing today, trying to get our heads around the real cost of all this plastic.
Yeah, unpack those consequences.
We'll dig into why recycling isn't quite the fix we hoped for, and look at, the urgent need to shift to something more sustainable.
We'll cover the environmental side, the health stuff, what happens long term.
And also touch on maybe newer generations, AI, could they help? And the money side of things, too.
And just to set the scene, get this. Over 400 million tons of plastic are made every single year. And more than half of that, single use, designed to be thrown away, but it sticks around for, well, centuries.
Centuries. Okay, let's dive right in. The environment. That's maybe the most obvious place we see the impact, the oceans.
Oh, definitely. We've all seen those images, unfortunately. But the actual amount going in each year, it's pretty mind-blowing.
How much are we talking?
Around 11 million metric tons every year. Picture like a garbage truck just backing up and dumping plastic into the sea every single minute.
Every minute. That's hard to even imagine. And it's not just the big stuff floating around, is it? There are other impacts.
Well, yeah, beyond the visible trash, these plastics break down into tiny bits, microplastics, and they can actually change the ocean chemistry.
Really? How?
It affects things potentially like climate regulation, the very base of the marine food web. We're still figuring all that out. And then there's the direct harm to animals.
Right, the entanglement, swallowing plastic.
Exactly. We estimate about 100,000 marine mammals, millions of seabirds die every year because of plastic. Fishing gear, bags, all that stuff. And then you get these huge collections, like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Which isn't really a solid island of trash, right? It's more diffuse.
Precisely. It covers this vast area, 1.6 million square kilometers. And a lot of it is actually microplastics. Tiny fragments, almost invisible, just swirling around.
And these microplastics, they aren't just staying in the ocean patches.
No way. They're turning up everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere.
Like where?
Think Arctic snow, rainwater. It's even been found in human breast milk.
Breast milk. Wow.
Yeah, it just shows how pervasive this contamination is. And, finding them is one thing, but what happens when they get into the food chain?
That's bioaccumulation, isn't it? Little things eat plastic, bigger things eat them.
You got it. The concentration just goes up and up. So that fish you might eat, it could be carrying quite a load of microplastics.
And it's not just the water. Land is affected too.
Oh, yeah. Plastic waste chokes animals on land too. It contaminates soil, messes up the tiny microbes that keep soil healthy.
And what about getting rid of it? We often burn plastic waste, right?
We do. Incineration. It handles maybe 14% of plastic waste globally, but
yeah,
it releases some really nasty stuff.
Like what?
Dangerous carcinogens, things called dioxins, furans. They go into the air, contribute to air pollution, and climate change too.
So it's hitting our oceans, our land, our air, which of course leads straight to us, our health.
Right. It's not just the planet. The evidence is growing that these microplastics are getting inside our bodies.
Where have they been found?
In human lungs, bloodstream, the placenta, feces, and like we said, breast milk. So you're probably breathing them in, eating them, drinking them without even knowing it.
It sounds unsettling. What's the main worry there?
The concern is these particles are small enough to cross biological barriers. They could get into organs, mess with cells, maybe cause inflammation, damage, trigger immune responses. We're still researching the full effects.
And it's not just the plastic particle itself. It's the chemicals they add to the plastic.
Exactly. Plastics aren't just pure polymers. They're loaded with additives. BPA, phthalates, flame retardants, a whole chemical cocktail.
And these chemicals have known health risks.
Oh, definitely. Many are endocrine disruptors. They mess with your hormones.
How does that work?
Well, think of your hormones like signals in your body. These chemicals interfere with those signals. It's linked to things like infertility. I mean, sperm counts have dropped like 50% in 50 years.
50%, that's huge.
It is. Also early puberty, hormonal imbalances. Then there are links to cancers, breast, prostate. Some studies show a 20% higher risk for prostate cancer in exposed groups. Testicular cancer, too.
And brain development.
Yeah, some are neurotoxicants. They might affect how brains develop, especially in fetuses,
Mhm.
possibly contributing to ADHD, autism spectrum disorders, and even obesity. Some are called obesogens because they seem linked to metabolic problems.
Gosh, feels like a minefield. And like with a lot of environmental problems, some people get hit harder than others, right?
Absolutely. Environmental injustice is a huge part of this. Communities near plastic factories or waste sites, often low-income or minority communities,
They bear the brunt.
they really do. Higher rates of breathing problems, skin issues, even cancer clusters. Sometimes cancer rates are 3 times higher,
3 times.
and globally. Wealthier countries like the US and in the EU, they ship about 1 million tons of plastic waste a year, often to poorer countries.
Places like Indonesia, Philippines, Ghana. You mentioned those earlier.
Exactly. They end up having to deal with maybe 80% of this imported waste, but they often don't have the systems to handle it properly, so it gets dumped illegally, burned. More health problems, more pollution.
It's a vicious cycle, which I guess brings us to recycling. We're always told that's the answer.
Yeah, the promise of recycling. We've all been sorting our bins for years, right? Believing it all gets turned into new stuff.
But the numbers, they tell a different story.
They really do. Globally, only about 9%. 9. Of all the plastic ever made has actually been recycled.
Only 9%. What happens to the rest?
Most of it. Burned, like we said.
Yeah.
Or buried in landfills. Or it ends up polluting the environment, the oceans.
So why is the success rate so low? It feels like there's such a push to recycle.
Well, there are a few big hurdles. First, the materials themselves are complex. Lots of plastic items mix different types or have layers. Makes them hard to separate and recycle.
Right.
Then there's contamination, leftover food, putting the wrong things in the bin, what people sometimes call wish cycling.
Good cycling, like hoping it's recyclable even if you're not sure.
Exactly. It sounds good, but it can actually contaminate a whole batch of otherwise good recyclables, making them useless.
Ah.
And honestly, a big one is economics.
Mhm.
Making brand new virgin plastic is often cheaper than using recycled plastic, sometimes 30% cheaper.
So there's less demand for the recycled stuff.
Pretty much. The real cost, the pollution cost, isn't built into the price of new plastic. It makes it hard for recycling to compete fairly.
And that links back to exporting the waste, doesn't it? Cheaper to ship it away than build better recycling systems at home.
It is. Offload the problem. But it just moves the burden, creates injustice elsewhere. There are some policy ideas, though, like the EU aiming for 30% recycled content in products by 2030. That could help build demand.
Right. So recycling alone clearly isn't the silver bullet. We need to think bigger picture, long-term effects on ecosystems, on society.
Yeah, definitely. Beyond the immediate pollution, think about biodiversity. We mentioned over 700 species are known to ingest plastic. And those microplastics, they can smother things like coral reefs. Studies show reefs decline about 30% faster when there's a lot of microplastic around.
Wow. Smothering them. And what about the climate change connection? You touched on that.
Yes, it's significant. Making plastic, from getting the oil out of the ground to manufacturing and disposal, it pumps out greenhouse gases. Right now, it's about 3.8% of global emissions.
More than flying.
More than the entire aviation industry, yeah. And if we keep going like this, projections say plastics could use up 20% of the world's oil by 2050.
20%. That's staggering. It really ties the plastic crisis and the climate crisis together. And what about us? Has living with all this cheap, disposable plastic changed how we think?
I think it absolutely has, this whole disposable mindset. It goes against the idea of a circular economy, designing things to last, to be reused, repaired.
Just throw things away now.
Too easily. But it doesn't have to be that way. Look at Germany's bottle deposit system. People bring back bottles, they get recycled at much higher rates. It shows systems can change behavior.
Okay, so the situation feels pretty heavy. But is there hope? Are younger generations, new tech, making a difference?
There really is reason for optimism, especially looking at younger people. There's so much more awareness, so much action. Think about movements led by people like Greta Thunberg, all the zero waste initiatives.
Be really engaged.
Deeply engaged. And it's not just protesting. You see young entrepreneurs coming up with really cool alternatives.
Like?
Oh, things like packaging made from algae. Or using mycelium that's mushroom roots to create materials. Really innovative stuff.
Algae packaging. Did that break down easily?
Yeah, potentially fully biodegradable, even compostable. Tackles that end-of-life problem plastics have. And it's not just grassroots. Policy is shifting too, like the UN Plastic Treaty trying to cap production globally.
And companies.
Yeah.
Are they stepping up?
Some are making pledges. Coca-Cola says it aims for a 100% recyclable packaging by 2030. We have to watch closely to see if these pledges translate into real change, of course.
True. Okay, so momentum is building, but what about the cost? Moving away from cheap plastic. Isn't that expensive?
That's a really important question. Short term, yes, there will be costs. Bioplastics, for example, can be about twice as expensive as regular plastic right now.
Okay.
But you have to weigh that against the long-term savings. Think of the billions spent on cleaning up plastic pollution, the healthcare costs from related illnesses, the climate change impacts. Some estimates suggest we could save like $200 billion a year globally if we cut down on plastic drastically.
Yeah. $200 billion a year. And jobs. What happens to people working in the plastic industry?
There will be shifts, no doubt. Some jobs in traditional plastic making might decrease, but switching to a circular economy, developing sustainable materials, that creates new jobs, potentially millions.
Really?
Yeah, projections suggest maybe 10 million new jobs in recycling, sustainable materials, that sort of thing, by 2040. So yes, upfront investment, some disruption, but the long-term economic picture could actually be pretty positive. New industries, new opportunities.
You mentioned healthcare costs earlier and specific diseases. Can we revisit that? Any strong links we should really highlight?
Yes, the evidence is getting stronger. We talked about endocrine disruption. Well, that's been linked to maybe a 40% rise in thyroid disorders.
40%.
Yeah, and people who work directly with plastic waste, especially in places with fewer safety rules, they have much higher rates, maybe 50% higher of things like COPD, other serious lung diseases from breathing in dust and fumes. It really shows the direct human toll.
It really does. And you also mentioned AI, artificial intelligence. How specifically could that help with this massive plastic problem?
Right. AI is showing some real potential. IBM, for instance, has AI systems that can sort recycling much more accurately, like 95% accuracy.
That'll make a big difference.
Huge. Better sorting means less contamination, higher quality recycled stuff. And then you have groups like the Ocean Cleanup using AI vision systems on their boats to actually map where the plastic pollution is thickest in the oceans.
So they can target their cleanup better.
Exactly. Focus the effort where it's needed most. So AI can help manage waste better on land and tackle what's already out there in the water.
Yeah, that's definitely encouraging. Okay, just to kind of wrap our heads around the scale again.
Yeah.
Can we quickly recap some of those key numbers on plastic's global footprint?
Sure. So over 400 million tons produced each year. Over 300 million tons of waste generated annually since the 50s. Over 8.3 billion tons produced in total.
Billion.
And every year, 11 million tons leaking into the oceans. If we do nothing, that could hit 29 million tons a year by 2050. Wow.
Okay.
But, and this is really important, studies also show that with serious, coordinated global action, the kind of things we've discussed, we could potentially cut that ocean leakage by up to 80%.
80% reduction is possible.
It seems possible. So the challenge is enormous, yes, but the future isn't set in stone.
That's actually a really powerful note of hope there. So as we finish up this deep dive, what's the main thing you want people listening to take away?
I think the core message is that plastic pollution isn't just one thing. It's not just litter. It's this deep, interconnected crisis hitting our environment, our health, our societies. And it needs urgent, coordinated action globally.
And what does that action look like? It can feel kind of overwhelming for one person.
It has to be multi-layered. We need policy changes, global treaties, national laws, local bans on single-use stuff, maybe tax incentives for sustainable options.
Right.
We need companies to take responsibility for their products, cradle to grave. We need to keep supporting the activists, the young people driving change, and keep investing in innovation, AI, new materials.
So everyone has a role, from individuals to governments to big companies.
Exactly. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Take a moment to think about your own relationship with plastic. What small changes could you make? Maybe support bigger changes in your community. Because tackling this, it's not just about cleaning up beaches. It feels like a moral duty, really, for ourselves and for the future.